My name is Adrian Nantchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. But this podcast, however, brings entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneurs from all over the world to share with you their stories, their journey, their struggles, everything like that, to bring you inspiration. To teach you and share with you what makes them remarkable. So today I have with me Ura Soul. So please, Ura, please explain, what is it you do, what's your story, what do you believe in, and what difference are you making in the world?
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me. So I guess I should begin with a little bit of my background. So I was born in England, and from a very early age was using computers and programming computers actually from age 4. My mum was an engineer in the 60s, and she had one of the first computers, really. She was learning on that when she was in her career, and it felt very natural for me to learn that too when I was small. So I come from a family of engineers pretty much as well, so that's just always been within me. And as I grew up, I continued to focus on that and lots of other things as well. And when I went to do my degree, I chose applied computing, which is a kind of mixture of business and computing science. So the end result is I became a kind of systems designer, architect, and programmer, and basically able to do everything that businesses need when they want a computer system built. So when I finished that, I should probably say, basically, during that period and through most of my life, I've always had problems with illness, and I always, various different problems, could never find any sort of reliable medical people that really could explain or even come close to helping me with some of these problems. So that was a real point of frustration for me. And so at a certain point, I started to realize, the human body is a system, society is a system, I'm studying systems, so I just started thinking in a more holistic way about how to approach health and the body and everything, using some of the skills that I'd learned and so on during my degree. And later on, I took a job with a big pharmaceutical company without really realizing some of the corruption issues, let's say, with pharmaceutical industry. So I was quite naive and just needed some money, really. But that helped me to see the inside of how they operate. And since then, I've seen a lot of different industries from inside as a result of really just working on software, because the skills that I have cover pretty much all industries. So I've seen a lot of different sides to human life and businesses and so on. So bringing all of this together really is something that I've done for, let's say, 15 years, is in my own mind and heart finding ways to bring all of this experience into one, not a box, but let's say one expression that I can give to the world. And so I've been working on a book for a number of years, but in practical terms, what I've actually put out so far to the world is mostly online, and I currently run a social network which is at eureka.org, which is ureka.org. And ultimately, it's a social network that aims to promote understandings and kind of, I don't really like the word educate, but help people to evolve their understandings of themselves and how to heal and how to balance each other and ourselves and society as a whole. So what that actually involves is let's say information which the mainstream systems don't want you to hear about, because they're all about making money, not so much about really helping you, combined with anything really that's of use in actually practically helping to help ourselves and improve life. So it can be absolutely anything really, but so far it's really focused on body health matters, history, like digging out the denied history of planet Earth, and lots of different related fields that I'm interested in. And basically anyone can come and join, as they can with Facebook and other sites. So it's not just a question of, it's all my content, but it tends to be that people, because I'm not marketing the site actively, particularly at the moment, with any budget, it tends to be that people on there are people who are similar to me and interested in similar topics. But I'm sure that's going to change in the coming months as I put a bit more effort into marketing it.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going off there. You mentioned the website, Eureka, not Eureka.
Yes.
Eureka.org.
Yeah, that's right. Just same as the Greek kind of. I think it's Greek. I'll be embarrassed if that's wrong, but without an e at the start. So yeah,
Yeah.
Ureka.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I actually worked on a previous project with some people in London who wanted to build a social network for content creators and musicians. This was a long time ago, before there really was any competition in that field. So I had quite a bit of experience working on that project, and when I finished with that, I looked to build something for myself and realized that, I mean, most software projects you're going to have 10 to 100 people working on the project. For me to do it on my own, that's not really possible. But thankfully, because there's open source projects available now, which whereby you've got groups of people around the world collaborating to produce significant sized frameworks and projects that anyone can then pick up and use themselves. I was able to find one which was pretty mature at that point, or ready to use at least, which I could then adapt and create my own system from. So it did take a lot of time for me to do that, and a lot of my own hours, but ultimately I was able to do that, and I'm kind of at the point now where there's a few features I need to add, and it can definitely be improved, but the majority of what I want to be in there is in there, and anyone can come and join it and use it and play around. So, yeah.
Cool, interesting. You mentioned that you prefer to spread the knowledge of yourself and who you are, as opposed to educate. In the context of that, what is wrong with education?
Well, every idea that we can talk about, we all hold definitions of every idea. So if I say the word education, it's not necessarily going to be the same, in your mind as it is in mine, and same for everyone else. So, a lot of people have had, let's say, bad memories of going to school, and they don't like education really, where there's a kind of concept of a top-down hierarchy where you've got a kind of, the teachers and the people they nominate are considered to be the top, and everyone else is beneath them, and they have to kind of do what they're told and so on. I mean, that's not the pure definition of education, but that's the memory people have of it a lot of the time. So I tend to avoid using that word, just in the sense that I don't intend anything that I do to be me telling other people what's right or how to live or anything like that. What I'm attempting to do is just reflect to other people what I've learned through my own inner explorations, let's say, and through listening to others as well. And then other people can pick up on that and be inspired by it or not. It's their choice, but it's not me, attempting to imprint into other people a particular way of living or anything like that. So I just like to make that sort of delineation in people's minds, because for me, I know that if I see someone online saying, they're going to educate me about health and they're going to educate me about this and that, all these subjects that are quite personal, I might be turned off by that and not really very excited by it. So, whereas if I hear, this person's, studied all these topics, they've read all these books, they've done all this stuff, and maybe they're going to have something interesting for you to listen to, that's a bit different. So.
All right. Well, speaking of interesting, also going back a little bit, you mentioned that, like, on the mainstream, they deny the history of the Earth and the history of the self or the body and health. Could you elaborate on that, please? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's a big subject. On the surface, I would say that, I think many people are aware that if you live in a society whereby your power in society is somewhat measured by the amount of money you have in your bank account, there's a lot of, let's say, motivation for people to do whatever it takes to increase their bank account, and without really paying much attention to the real effects of what they're doing. And obviously we can see that in the way that, for example, the environment is often very polluted by big corporations and so on. And in our food supply, the food is generally denutrified, and the foods that you're going to find in supermarkets typically are substandard. They're not real food. They're just something that food scientists have created in order to stimulate your taste buds and just sell something as cheaply as possible that you're going to buy. So those are two good examples of the way that, let's say, greed or just a general lack of care has led important areas of life to be, let's say, reduced in value or actually made problematic. And I think that ultimately that kind of attitude, which is quite common in many big corporations, in my experience, and according to the evidence put forward by lots of whistleblowers and so is far too prevalent on our planet today and is really causing a lot of problems. And I think that when you look at how the corporations kind of take control of governments as best they can, put their people on the boards of certain think tanks or organisations and so on, who influence government, you can start to see how they can also influence very important fields of study within human experience as well, such as history and all different sciences and pretty much everything. And as a result of that and other factors, I mean, I can pretty much prove, but it's definitely true that, for me at least, that there's big gaps in our education system and what people are being taught to think about themselves and their life and where they come from and so on. And when you examine them and you really ask questions in a kind of free-thinking way, you find that most of what we're taught to believe or think is, at best, deeply flawed, and at worst, a deliberate lie. So, yeah. I mean, there's lots of websites and people talking about these subjects, and it's just, I've put a lot of time into hundreds, I mean, an uncounted number of days and hours studying this stuff, so I feel like I've kind of got to the root of a lot of it.
Well, fascinating. A lot of stuff I'm curious about and how it all works. With regards to, you said like denutrified and just bad substance. Is it not also like the blame on the consumer as well? Because if the consumer was more free-thinking, more enlightened, they wouldn't buy those things, and if they didn't buy those things, there'd be no incentive to produce and supply and to create the supply.
Yeah, well, it's a mixture of. I mean, everyone has responsibility for themselves, so that is true. But at the same time, your overall health affects your ability to hold consciousness and to actually be able to think intelligently. So if you've been raised in a family who are feeding you denutrified food, you're not necessarily going to be in the best position to actually understand all this stuff. And if you are not receiving any education about it at all, then from your school, then the only information you're really getting about it comes from, let's say, mass media, and those are the exact sources where they are deliberately putting propaganda and false information to keep you buying their products. So you're not in a very good position to fix the problem. And I mean, for me, when I was growing up, I was that person. I didn't have any knowledge about these things. And, my family and most people I met were kind of the opinion, well, if it tastes good, then eat it kind of thing. So they weren't really even concentrating or thinking at all about nutrition. And it's taken me, it took me about 5 years of studying this stuff to really get to grips with what was missing in my diet. And then I learned why it was missing. And then I realized, well, a lot of it is because the plants and so on that are grown on a mass scale are grown by farmers who are using synthetic chemicals, and they're not using the proper natural approach, and so the soils are depleted. So it starts at that level. So the only way you're going to get out of it is by changing the whole system or by growing your own food. And both of those are good ideas, but for the average person who's just figuring this stuff out, that they're not immediate options they're going to take. So
yeah, so it's essentially, going back a little bit, it's essentially down to breaking the conditioning, where, yes, breaking the cycle, but breaking the conditioning especially. This is getting very interesting, I must admit. You also spoke about, with regards to the denutrified and substances, the inner exploration of yourself in context of what you're doing at eureka.org. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Sure, yeah. I mean, obviously, what I'm through the medium of the internet, there's only so much that can be done, and it really has to be based on information and maybe a bit of multimedia. But generally, we can't physically do things through the web, obviously. So from that perspective, what I'm learning has to be converted into a digital format, and generally, obviously, that's text and so on. But there's only so much that you can do in that way. So I've had to develop a very specific form of clear language, which also comes something that I created as partially through years of programming against the clock, and whereby your computer's going to effectively say very quickly, no, what you're doing is wrong, your logic's wrong, And when you're in that position against the clock, you really have to clean up your own logic in your own mind and how you think. And so I've tried to use some of those abilities, let's say, or altered patterns within myself to be able to express to other people some of the inner explorations which I've undertaken in my life, which, let's say, a lot of people, certainly when I was younger, hadn't done, because, I mean, when I was young, the internet, let's say when I left university, the internet was not really very big. You know, it existed, but it wasn't a big thing. So there was somewhat of a revolution after that kind of time, where lots of people started meeting each other and sharing ideas, and I learned a lot. Like, I was on Tribe.net, which was one of the first social networks from America that was run alongside, there's a big festival in America called Burning Man, so a lot of people that went to Burning Man would be on Tribe. And I suddenly discovered those guys and was just amazed at how many really interesting people were on there talking about subjects I'd never heard about. So I learned a lot from them, but unfortunately now what's happened is, for example, that website got bought out by Cisco, and I noticed immediately as soon as it was bought out, it was just dumped. You know, like they stopped supporting it completely, and I was a bit, you know, as soon as I heard that they'd bought that, I immediately thought this is not good, because Cisco have a reputation for doing some, let's say, inhuman things. From my memory anyway, I'm not an expert in Cisco, but I do remember they were involved in China with, I think it was them, with execution vans going around actually picking up dissidents and killing them, and they provided the technology for that. I don't want them to sue me up for that, but that's my memory of that whole situation. Someone might, you know, correct me on that, but what I'm really saying, though, is that they really didn't seem to have any intention of building that website or that community, and they seemed to be buying it just to shut it down, and they did. So the people that were in that network, you know, I met some of them on other networks like Facebook and other ones that sprung up, but really that whole culture just disappeared. You know, there's a really, really good group of people there, and if you try to create something like that on Facebook now, it just doesn't really succeed, because they've deliberately designed Facebook to have a non-thread-based system. So in other words, it's not like the old-style forums where you can just write a title, this is what my post is about, and then you're going to get all these comments underneath it, and then you can archive it and search it and go through and find all these old questions and really interesting conversations that people had 10 years ago. You can't really do that very easily on Facebook. It is possible, but if you're going to go into a group in Facebook, for example, you're just going to see this constant new turnover of posts, and there's a sort of disconnection there where people don't, in my experience, don't seem to have such a good connection as they have done in the past on other sites and could do. So with being somebody who's lived through all of these changes, I can see the problems with that and how it's possible to design a social network that's an improvement on all of that stuff. So I've bared that in mind as I've designed Eureka, and Eureka isn't finished, and because of the limited resources I have, you know, I've only been able to do so much with it so far, but have designed it with the idea of it being an information resource in mind, as opposed to just being just another social network where you post things and have a bit of fun. It's actually a resource as well that you can use to learn from, and a bit like a library, really. So it's a bit of a mixture of a few different ideas in one.
So what kind, on Eureka.org, was it, .org?
Yes, yeah.
Eureka.org, what kind of information can we find on there? What kind of information will people discover, you know, the knowledge? What will they learn?
Well, there's many different categories on there, and the categories can change as people want them to change. So if the community wants to see certain things on there, then they'll be added. What was on there initially were the subjects that I want to cover with the site. So you've got lots of different health subjects, and so through holistic healing, detoxification, all these kinds of useful processes which, let's say, aren't so commonly understood, but that I at least know do work. Those kind of subjects through to media subjects, you know, documentaries and historic subjects, and then there's whole sections in there to do with society, so lots and lots of posts about government and whistleblowers and military, religion, pretty much, you know, everything that we encounter in life is roughly covered in the categories. And in terms of, I mean, most of the material you're going to find on there at the moment are things that I've posted, although there's a few hundred users of the site who do post on there. But the majority is my stuff, because I'm kind of, I'm always researching information online, and when I find useful and good subjects and videos and things, then I add them in there for reference. So yeah, I mean, basically, if it's a subject which can be used to heal people, and that includes learning about some of the most horrible parts of life as well, because my perspective basically is if you find the biggest problems and the most horrible things and you fix them, then you're going to have made a big difference to things rather than trying to always find the good things and accentuate the positive. My perspective is if you fix all the really big problems, that should have the biggest possible effect to then go and enjoy the good things. So it puts off some people to be kind of confronted with what they're trying to hide from, really, but that's part of what we need to do to improve Earth, I feel, is to stop avoiding, very important subjects. So.
Oh yeah, definitely, I agree. You've got to face criticism, got to face the fire, otherwise you're not going to expand your comfort zone or realise the truth or stuff like that. Going on a slight whim here now, because you mentioned that Eureka has different topics on there, from whistleblowers to health and beyond. Is it on par, or is it a quasi kind of WikiLeaks at all, or is it just a little hobby of yours?
No, it's not a hobby as such. I mean, I have my own information to share, which, some people might say you should put that on WikiLeaks, but WikiLeaks is, as I understand it, is more meant to be an anonymous route for people to get their information out to the world. This is not that, really. I mean, you can use the site anonymously, but I make the point on one of the pages in the website, which is about tracking and privacy. Basically, I'm saying, I don't personally think that any digital system is fully secure. I don't think it's possible for it to be completely secure. And so if you have information that you don't want everyone in the world reading about, then don't put it online anywhere. And so I'm doing my best to make the website secure, and it is, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty secure, but I can't 100% guarantee the anonymity of anyone that uses the system, and I don't really think WikiLeaks can either, probably, and most websites can't. But so I don't think I need to really match WikiLeaks. They're doing a pretty good job from what I can see, or at least as good as I would do. So it's more a place for people to come and meet each other and learn and heal themselves, basically, or help to heal each other and themselves, as opposed to just a raw source of, let's say, previously hidden information.
All right. So I'm very, very, very curious then. Healing, because you mentioned that a few times, that health, the holistics, and not commonly understood methods. So
yeah,
what can you share about that? Any popular techniques or some basic stuff that people really ought to know, or anything common, or anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've learned from numerous people who I've met through the internet mostly, and I would say, let's say, it's very difficult to say, but you're talking about these people that I respect who have shown me that what they teach about healing is actually correct, and I've used it and done really amazing things with it. Probably talking about less than 0.5% of the population maximum, and in other words, most people don't know this stuff, and they really should do. And when you really look into this information, why they don't know it is because if you do know it, the entire medical system kind of falls apart. Most of it does, because you just don't need it, because you can heal yourself. So that explains in part why we don't know it. But as an example, I mean, the interesting thing is that a lot of this information we do know. Most people do know some of it, but they don't apply it. So because they don't apply it, they never really understand the value of it, and they never move on to the next level. So, for example, let's say sunlight, for example. People, we're both in Britain. It's basically impossible, pretty much, for us to get enough sunlight, apparently, for us to be fully healthy, because it just isn't enough here, full stop. So people that analyse nutrition and so on will say, well, we must take a vitamin D supplement. I don't have a laboratory. I can't, prove or disprove that myself. But I do know that when I go out to another country and get a lot of sun for a couple of weeks, I feel really good, and generally my health improves. I'm not going to argue with that. But that's just one example where most people, at least let's say in Britain, are not getting enough sunlight, and it makes a massive difference to their health. It affects so many different systems in the body, and has knock-on effects on so many different processes that that one thing alone, really people should be paying more attention to. When you realise that something as obvious as that, and not only is it obvious that it helps us, but we're told also that the sun is very dangerous and that it actually causes, skin cancer and other, probably, well, we know it causes skin burning and so on, but there's been an over accentuation, I would say, on the dangers of sunlight, and an under representation of the values of sunlight, such that a lot of people just, they don't even think of it as being something they need to focus on. That's just one example out of, let's say, 50, but water as well. I mean, I listened to your recent podcast about fluoride, and I agree with pretty much everything that was said there, and I've studied that quite a lot. I monitored my own tap water using a digital meter for a few years in different parts of the country, and I really found that they were, sometimes they would be dumping much too much, even for the World Health Organization's recommended levels of fluoride, which themselves are highly debatable, but they were dumping in much more than that even. These kind of things to do with nutrients, I would say sunlight is a kind of nutrient. The nutritional requirements definitely are not very well understood by most people. And so that's just, let's say I could break this down into about 6 or 7 different main categories, and nutrition would definitely be one of them. So,
you mean in what way sunlight helps you in 6 or 7 categories? Or
no, sorry, just health in general. Just the information that we need to be healthy can be broken down probably into about 6 or 7 categories. Let's say.
Would it be okay if you elaborated on those?
Yeah, sure. So one of them would be like nutrients, as I said. One of them would definitely be exercise, which most people understand. You need to be moving your body, particularly. One thing that a lot of people don't really understand, and I didn't know for a long time, is that our body has a system in it called the lymphatic system, which is the part which basically takes the junk out of the cells. It's like the garbage system. So if your lymphatic system isn't healthy, then it's a bit like your house not having any garbage collection anymore. You're just everything's going to become stagnant, and it's not going to be a good situation. And interestingly, the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump. So not in the same way that the blood system does, where you have a heart pumping the blood around. The lymphatic system, actually, as I understand it, is moved mainly by walking and moving the legs. So the legs act as the pump for that system. So if you're sitting on the sofa all day long, then you have a stagnant lymphatic system, which means your body isn't working properly. So that one point, when you actually understand that now you have an understanding, oh, well, that's why I need to do exercise. That's one really good reason, apart from all the other reasons we're told about. That one is absolutely fundamental to health. So definitely exercise is number 2. Oxygenation as well, which goes hand in hand with the exercise. So, yoga and other ancient forms of exercise very, very strongly focus on breathing. And in fact, some yoga teachers will say, well, if you're doing the yoga postures and you're not breathing in a yogic way, then you aren't actually doing yoga, because yoga is the breath. And it really is. Anybody that's done any breath work for any sustained amount of time will know the value of that. And it's certainly a lot more... it has a lot more effect than just oxygenation of the body and the cells, even though that's very important. But it really does open up your mind, and your process. All your processes improve as a result of deep breathing and correct oxygenation. So again, that's something that until you do it, you don't fully appreciate it. And now we're seeing lots more people opening up and doing these things than they certainly were in previous generations. But there's still, I would say, a big gap of understanding about that.
Yeah, some things here you've mentioned I've knew and I've heard before as well. With regards to sun, going back a little bit, I've heard that sunscreen is very bad for us because the chemicals inside that are not healthy for us. And with regards to the fluoride as well, thank you very much for watching that podcast. And shortly after I did that podcast, I did a bit of research and I found out that where I am, here in the UK, or my part of the UK, there is 1 part per million of fluoride in the water. So that's something interesting to note. And with regards to the lymphatic system, yeah, essentially the waste system in the body. And I've heard that in your intestines, whenever there's fecal matter that's not excreted from the body, that stays to the canal of the intestines, and it seeks the rot or the poison into the body, leaking. And you have to get rid of that, and through enemas or salt flush, things like that. Very good for pumping out the lymphatic system. I didn't know about walking and how that helps to get the lymphatic system moving. That's completely new to me. That's fascinating.
Okay, yeah.
And oxidation as well. Just quickly, oxidation. Yeah. I've heard the breathing. oxidation is very fundamental, very powerful with the breathing and the controlling of it. So yes, please. You're going to say something then?
Yeah, I mean, just what you brought up about the digestive system. The digestive system is another part of our system which is deeply under-researched, let's say, or not really something that people understand enough about. I'm certainly not an expert on it, but I do understand that a lot of our immune system begins in our digestive organs, which might surprise a lot of people. And what you mentioned there about the problems with digestion. For example, if you eat a lot of heavy, dense meats, and even just some factory-produced foods, they can get stuck in the folds of your digestive system. And literally, I mean, there's one guy, he said he had a colonic irrigation, and there were examples of foods coming out that had been there since he was a baby. So in other words, the foods had been stuck in the creases inside his gut for 20, 30 years. So yeah, that's not really a very good situation. And the colonic process, which interestingly, I've actually done to myself once. I've never had it done professionally, but that actually fills the whole digestive tract up with water and opens up all the creases and folds and helps clean it all out, really. And I have to say, I had a pain in my abdomen, which is partly why I did that. That had been there for about 9 months, and I did that one flush, and the pain went, basically. So, there are people who will poo-poo these ideas without meaning to put a pun in there, and basically will say, no, this, it doesn't have any scientific basis, it's not medically proven to be useful, and so on. But all they're really saying is the policies of the government say that it's no use, but if you listen to the many, many, many people who have them done regularly, they'll tell you something different. So,
there's always going to be a lot of that, and you say 20, 30 years. I remember hearing an article, or hearing from someone, probably hearsay by now, but when Elvis Presley died, and when Johnny Cash died as well, they had, certainly Elvis, he had 22 kilograms of fecal matter inside his body.
Okay.
Yeah. This is just hearsay now, but I can't remember who said it, but I remember that specific fact, almost word for word. And Johnny Cash, right, very similar as well.
Well, I think Elvis died on the toilet, so, yes. Who knows, it's quite possible.
Yeah.
So what you were mentioning there, the other issue is what's known as mucoid plaque, which is basically a layer which forms within the digestive pipework, let's say, over the years, which actually means that it's kind of like a rubber tube, which basically blocks off your digestive system from what you're eating. So even if you're eating the best possible food, it's doing nothing because it's not really getting into your body. So that's something which colonic irrigation can remove effectively. You don't have to use colonic irrigation. There's other herbal methods as well, but that you can. If you research this online, you'll see lots of pictures of people in colonic irrigation clinics holding up big, long, kind of snake-like things which have come out of them, basically, which were actually previously inhibiting their ability to receive nutrition. So,
yes, I've heard about this the mucoid plaque lately. Probably 24 hours ago, something like that. So it's very new to me. Okay. Yeah, I heard about that. How the heck does that grow inside you? I used to always worry about getting tapeworms. Clearly, that was the least of my concerns.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? We might all have a few worms in us, but allegedly we do. But I can't comment on that particularly. But I'm not an expert in biology or cellular mechanics or anything, so it's probably not my place to go into the finer points of how mucoid plaque is formed. But you can certainly find that online, I'm sure, without too much difficulty.
Mm-hmm. All right. So please continue with these 6 or 7 things you mentioned that people should be aware of or heavily misunderstood. So we have nutrition, exercise, oxidation, digestive system, and what else?
Yeah, well, let's say one of them would be psychological. So obviously pretty much everything we do originates in some way, shape or form in a thought. And so if our thoughts are not balanced and if they're not true, ultimately, then we're not going to be optimally healthy. It's basically impossible. And what a lot of people don't really appreciate is that your physical body, your physical form, has an origin which is non-physical. So this is something which is taught through. I haven't really studied yoga in a kind of historic context, but I do understand having read a few books and done yoga myself for a fair while, I understand that it's a process of self-enlightenment. So in other words, you learn this through direct cognition. You directly understand it. It's not taught to you as such. And I have experienced this myself in that when people say, this person's bright or this person's dim, and they're kind of relating the idea of light to consciousness in terms of you have more light, therefore you're brighter, therefore you're more intelligent. That's actually a real phenomenon. It's not just a metaphor. It means literally we have an aspect to our, what people might call our spirit, which is actually light. And I'm pretty sure there's research come out probably through Russian scientists and so on, if I remember correctly, which demonstrates that our DNA has light moving through it and actual photons. And I would say, from my understanding, without having a way of proving this to someone else, that our internal light consciousness is that light that moves through the DNA. And so, in other words, the way that we think directly affects our body and the cells and every part of us. And I think Dr. Bruce Lipton is quite a well-known biologist, cellular biologist, who's written books on related topics and given talks all around the world who kind of concurs with that. I do remember him talking about how you should think of each cell in your body as being like a small human, and they are all basically part of you, and they all have certain needs and desires and thoughts directly run through them, basically. And it may not be in the way that you might imagine, or it may be, but the point is that we are one holistic entity that has thoughts moving through it, and those thoughts are vibrations and frequencies which can be felt and which can affect every cell. So it's very important to maximize your use of thought, let's say, and just clean up your stinking thinking.
Yeah, well, that's Zig Ziglar right there. With the vibrations, yeah, definitely. Now, this is interesting where it starts to all get full circle with regards to how all this is connected, because energy, we're all vibrations, as Tesla said. You mentioned also the light and the DNA. I remember hearing, maybe 2 years ago, something like that, that at the point of conception, there's a burst of light, and then the whole, the gestation period begins.
Okay, I mean, I haven't heard of that, but I do understand the concept of orgasm being very much connected to light and expansion of light, and I would even say that the Big Bang was an orgasm, so you can take with that, use that as you please.
Right, that's all new to me in general. Okay, yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting how we associate smart with it being enlightened and bright. So,
yeah. So I mean,
fascinating.
For example, like some people have said, we only use 10% of our brain, and a source of information that I respect basically says, no, you use 100% of your brain to make it seem like you only use 10% of your brain. So in other words, 90% of our brain is working against us to make us basically less intelligent than we should be. So if you're walking around with thoughts like, I'm stupid, or, I'm not good enough, I can never play the piano, all these different thoughts that, you may have had when you were 5 years old or 10 years old or whenever it was, and you moved on, you went to bed, you woke up the next day and forgot all about it, they're still in you. The resonance of those thoughts is still in your cells somewhere. And, they might affect your dreams, they might affect, how you imagine yourself and how you picture yourself. There could be 1 million, there could be 10 million, there could be any number, but every single one has the potential to affect your state of being. And so it's very important to kind of learn to meditate, I would say, and just allow those to surface and allow them to change.
Yeah, it's crazy what the mind can do and what we feed it as well, definitely. But as we begin to wrap this up, what is the last one of the things you mentioned that was misunderstood?
Yeah, I mean, the last one's probably the most important and the most misunderstood, so it's a good one to wrap up with, and that's emotionality and emotions. So in Britain, for example, we have the stiff upper lip. We have this kind of inherited idea that emotions are for the weak, emotions are for kind of, women, and they should probably only have one emotion every 6 months kind of thing. From a couple of 100 years ago anyway, that was, the prevailing idea, and that really stayed with us until not so long ago. And the net result is that really most people are very much confused and undervaluing their emotions. And what I've learned, if I had to just pick any one of all of these things that I've explained, I would pick emotions as being the most powerful for healing. As an example, I had a car accident about 10 years ago where I nearly died. I was actually hit by a lorry. I was doing about 60 miles an hour on the M25 coming home from work around London. And I thought I was going to die, and I looked in the mirror and I saw this truck coming, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I've got 2 seconds. And all I could do was relax, basically. I remembered reading that, if you get hit by a car or whatever, then just relax. That's the best you can do. So I did that, and I actually got out, and I was like, wow, I'm fine. I looked at the car was squashed. Only my door opened, and I kind of felt like I'd been saved by some sort of angelic force or something. I really thought I should have died. But what happened after that was, in the coming months, I had x-rays, and they said, oh, you're fine. But in the coming months after that, the whiplash was so bad that I now know what happened was my spine, each of the vertebrae had been moved into the wrong place pretty much, but no one detected it of the medical people I saw. And so what happened was, over the coming months, I just got more and more pain and less able to move, to the point where eventually I couldn't turn my head. I was just kind of almost crippled, really. And I saw an osteopath. I saw lots of other people, a few different people. Some of them helped me, some of them didn't. And I did yoga, and I did basically everything I could find to do, but still it didn't correct it. And I felt, I just felt really unhappy and quite depressed, and it really ruined my life for a few years, to be honest. And but at the same time, I was learning about emotional healing and processing from a particular set of books, which I found very helpful. And so there's so much information about that which I've been taught, and it's really impossible for me to explain it in less than a few days, actually. There's so much of it. But in short, what I learned was that during those few seconds, or however long it was that I was in that car crash, I had a lot of anger and fear in me. Fear that I was going to die, anger, I was too young, and all these kind of things you can imagine you might have in those moments. But because of the trauma involved in it, I never processed those emotions. So they basically just got frozen inside of me, and I just moved on. And so because your emotions are very much connected to your physical body and your psychology and everything, it meant that the muscles around my neck and my back and that whole area were locked into a rigid place, and that's why I couldn't turn my head. So what I found, the only way that I could fix that, no amount of massage, no amount of manipulation was going to fix it. What I needed to do was release those trapped emotions. So what I basically did was I gave up one day after, however many years of trying to pretend, oh no, those emotions aren't there, like probably a lot of people do. Not consciously, like semi-consciously, kind of just trying to ignore them. I was like, right, I'm just going to give up. I'm not going to use my mind anymore. My mind isn't going to try to solve these problems anymore. I'm just going to give up, and I'm going to let the emotions come out. So I just cried and screamed for about 5 minutes, as loud as I could, and turned all of that energy into sound, vibration, which is what they need, what the emotions need, because emotion is energy in motion, it's energy motion. So if the energy is not moving, then it's not an emotion, and it's not being allowed to be what it really is. So when I did that, after 4 or 5 minutes, however long it was, I stood up, and the lady that was with me, who was a therapist, who was a friend of a friend, looked at me and she said, oh, you're an inch taller. And I kind of said, what? So I sort of became aware of myself again and moved around, and my head was working correctly. I could turn my head again for the first time in 3 years maybe, and I was literally an inch taller because one of the vertebrae in my back had moved back into place. And so at that moment I knew that what I'd been learning was correct, it was completely right, and I suddenly realized all these pieces of the puzzle came into place. Oh, that's why this person was like that. That's why this person was like that. That's why we had this government movement, because they were trying to block out these emotions. And he suddenly realized the whole world is very much repressed emotionally, and a lot of our societal structures are actually designed to suppress emotions. It's become that backwards. So, I mean, like, for example, manners. The whole idea of manners, where you might be taught how to hold your spoon and fork at a dinner table and things like that. People say, oh, well, it's just nice, it just looks nice, but what it's basically doing is it's designed to stop you triggering other people's emotions. So, you're not going to make this person angry by accidentally touching their arm and things like that, because anger is bad. But in reality, anger isn't bad. It's there to protect you. It's there to make you do certain things, or guide you, let's say, to keep yourself alive. And it's actually quite a loving emotion. It's a survival instinct. There's nothing unloving about staying alive. The problem is that people's minds, let's say at the dinner table, that example there, their mind is judging the anger. They're making the anger bad. And when you judge that part of yourself as being bad, now it kind of takes on that form of being bad. You've made it bad. So now it's going to appear to you to be bad. So it's like, oh, I mustn't be angry when this person touches my arm. while I'm eating dinner because I feel like I'll get up and punch them in the face, because you've got all this buried rage. And yesterday even I heard a news story, a road rage. A guy killed a guy, road rage attack. It's like, well, why? Why does one person decide to get out of a car and kill someone when someone else doesn't? And really, it's just because they've been triggered into a massive pool of rage they've been holding for years and years and years and years beneath the surface. Suddenly it's come out, and it's become violent, whereas it could have just been eased out daily, in a gentle way, and the world would be much happier if we all understood how to do that.
Well, wow, okay, there's a lot of stuff there. Very quickly, though, I definitely agree with energy and motion, get rid of that. Wow, and repressed emotions, definitely. Wow. All right. So, very quickly, you mentioned some books earlier.
Yeah.
Could you, what are those titles and the author, please?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I listened to a lot of. I've read a lot of channeled books, which basically most people maybe aren't aware of what they are. I should probably explain before you go and read the book. Channeling is just where somebody meditates and another consciousness speaks through them. So it could be another. You don't necessarily know who it is. They'll tell you who they are, but they might say, I'm an angel or I'm a spirit or whoever it is. Basically, you may not believe that, but if the message is useful, then that's all you need to know, really. And in this case, a lady channeled a series of books starting in 1984 through to 2010, and she said that it was God speaking through her. And, at the time when I read these books, I didn't really know if that was possible or not. But I just read them anyway and found that they really do appear to be, as she said, and they really do work. And those books you can find, they're called, we call them like the Right Use of Will series, and you can find them at rightuseofwill.com. And she has a series of 7 books, I think, there, and another book which she released later, which is more for scientifically minded people, so it's less spiritual, let's say, and more kind of grounded in science.
Fascinating. I must look into that as well. But in the meantime, though, what is it you're working on as we begin to wrap this up fully?
Okay, yeah. I mean, at the moment, mainly I'm working on my website and my book, and I'm also working on a documentary. So I'm very busy, and I've put most of my time so far in the last few years into my website, and it would be great to find more people who wanted to work with me on that. I have found a couple of people in the past, but I haven't generally, because it's not a commercial site, so I mean, I do sell some T-shirts and things on there, but it's not at the moment intended to make money, so I don't have a big budget to pay people, so it's kind of dependent on people volunteering to want to kind of help the cause of it all. So if there's anyone out there who knows about programming, PHP, databases, or web design or anything like that, and looks at the site and thinks it's good, then don't hold back. Let me know. Maybe we can work together. So that's kind of one of my main projects. That was never intended to be my main project, though. That was actually intended to be a secondary project. The main project is actually the book that I've been working on, and that's going to be focusing on the things we've been talking about, and with a specific focus on language, because as a programmer and somebody who's always interested in language and puzzles and music, and I make music as well, I've just suddenly realised that I've learned a lot about language, and I have a lot of things to share with people on that subject that are really exciting. So in the next few months, that's what I hope to put a bit more time into.
Yeah, I'm going to include a link to these things in the description.
Excellent.
PHP, call to action for PHP programmers. But speaking of which, what is the best way for people in the audience to get in touch with you?
They can reach me via email. It's probably the quickest way, which is Ura at eureka.org, which is ureka.org. Alternatively, they can create a profile at Eureka and just message me through there. And either of those should be fine, really.
All right. It was great having you on the show. Really,
Thank you very much.
Very, very, very fascinating conversations.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate your podcast series. It looks like you're interviewing a lot of interesting people, so I'll keep coming back to check out the new ones.
Yes, there's a lot more interviews to come on all sorts of different topics. Very fascinating. But ladies and gentlemen at home, if you haven't already, click on the subscribe button if you're on YouTube, and then press the bell notification that's right next to it for the latest uploads. If you're on Steemit, however, don't forget to re-Steam this and give me a follow for the latest blogs and comments. Now remember, this channel is all about becoming remarkable, being a remarkable entrepreneur. So go out there today and do something remarkable in your life. How cool is that?